Hello and welcome to Aviadev Insight Africa, the podcast offering a window to the world of African aviation with your host, John Howell, CEO and founder of Aviadev Africa. On the podcast, we love to shine a light on new innovations, and the last couple of years have in many ways provided the perfect environment for new ideas that are going to shape the future of how we will travel. COVID has undoubtedly increased the complexity of travel, alongside the usual stresses of visas and all the other logistics that you have to organise when you make a trip. The added health protocols made travel more difficult than ever before. Today, we are not discussing a concept, but actually an active solution that came online in December 2021 in the Republic of Seychelles, namely a cutting-edge biometric corridor that screens arrivals to the country in a touchless and speedy environment. Our aim today is to understand the system and the problems it solves, how the visitors to the islands have responded to its implementation, and most importantly, how easily and effectively it can be implemented in other locations across Africa. So to do this, I'm joined by Alan Renaud, the Principal Secretary for Civil Aviation, Ports and Marine at the Republic of Seychelles, and Tom Marten, the Regional Managing Director at Travizory Border Security. So welcome to the podcast, gents.
Nice to be here.
Nice to be here too, John.
Fantastic. It's great to have you both on the podcast for the first time. So, Tom, if I can start with you, can you explain the concept of travizory and the problem that you set out to solve?
Yeah, the concept of travizory is all about traveling smart. The idea is to give digital tools to travelers, to governments, to airlines and airports, to make travel, air travel in particular, but also maritime, simple, swift, and safe. When I say simple, that means we put mobile apps into the hands of travelers so that they can do all the formalities necessary to fly to a country and enter a country online in the comfort of their homes from their cell phones. For airports and for governments, we've put biometric and biographic solutions together that allows travelers to move swiftly through lines at the airport. And then finally, safety. Safety is all about border security, but also about protecting the data of travelers, keeping their data safe. And that's what we set out to do. And I think in Seychelles, and Alan will talk about it, I think we've achieved that. We've achieved that through a quantum leap in technology. I've already mentioned mobile, but also our solution is cloud-based. And what does that mean? That means we're agile. It means we can pivot from border security to dealing with the COVID pandemic, back again to border security. The next pandemic comes, we'll be ready for it, and we'll be able to pivot again. Now, Travizory is a startup company. We're less than 3 years old, but we're composed of industry veterans. I personally have been selling these solutions around the world for 20, 30 years in all the biggest countries of the world. And one of the reasons I joined Travizory is because of the technology and because of that quantum leap. And the concept is traveling smart. It's all about giving travelers and stakeholders tools and to make air travel simple, swift, and safe.
Fantastic. So, Alan, let me come to you. Tell us a bit more about the system that's actually been implemented in the Seychelles. Why did you pick this system, and what functions does it perform that you needed it to deliver?
Thanks, John. Yeah, in fact, it's for all the reasons that Tom just mentioned. In 2019, Seychelles had been looking at border security and how we could implement, the UN security resolution mandates for advanced passenger screening, as well as passenger name records, for example. And I remember before we met with Travizory, I had seen 3 or 4 different vendors, and my overall impression was this was a very unique part of the industry and very expensive. And we're talking investments of tens of millions of dollars normally when a government does this. And for Seychelles, we were sort of looking at how we could afford to do it and how we could put it together. Then towards the end of 2019, the CEO of Travizory, Renaud Erminger and Igor Lutz, came by and did their presentation. And I walked in a few minutes late, and I watched them explain their version of the technology. And I remember I was immediately taken with it. Having seen the 3 or 4 vendors before, what I remember was there was a lot of upfront investment, a lot of bespoke technology, a lot of heavy equipment and training. And then here I saw 2 gentlemen with an iPad and an iPhone showing the same thing. And I'm like, what? Is it possible to do that just through technology, through software? And so it was a cloud-based solution. And having worked in the Seychelles for 15 years, at Air Seychelles and now as principal secretary, I knew that Seychelles needed a simple solution, something that we could run ourselves and something that was affordable. And the business model where it's paid for as you go, I knew instantly that this is something that we could use. So zoom ahead to 2020, we're in the middle of the COVID pandemic. We hadn't yet made a decision on our border security, but Travizory sent a note to us to say, oh, by the way, we have a solution for the pandemic because our same technology can be used to screen for COVID. And at that very moment when they sent that, we had a national reopening task force chaired by our ministers and a lot of government officials, and they were looking at how to introduce technology, and so they came at exactly the right moment, and so they did a presentation. At that time, the Public Health Commissioner was basically in charge of our borders because it was COVID-19, the pandemic, and so they, in fact, were in charge. The Quarantine Act was in charge, and they selected it. They did one presentation, and said, "That's it. This is exactly the solution that we needed." And so what we did with it, John, to answer your question, was knowing in advance that it was meant for border security, but we needed it for a pandemic, and being the principal secretary for Civil Aviation, I knew now I could probably kill three birds with one stone. So one was we have a startup software solution that we could do in a few weeks, and it took 4 weeks to set it up, where we could screen travelers in advance and to see whether they were safe, that they'd had the PCR tests and others so that they wouldn't spread the pandemic. That was very key. But then in addition to that, I knew that we could also take it further and we could work on our border security because it was the same system. I mean, the same. You could almost say a pandemic is a version of a threat to your nation, and so you're screening for a threat, and the same way you screen for that, you can screen for other things. And so throughout the rest of the year, we then added more and more capabilities. So that at first it was primarily for health screening. Then we added advanced passenger information from the airlines, and then we had passenger name record by early in 2021. And so we have a full-blown suite of border security, and when we got it approved by cabinet, we had a trial period. We were asked to extend it to the maritime sector, and it really worked well, John. When we first started, we had a 300-seat 777 from Emirates landing in July 2020. It took us about 2 hours to disembark because of all the paperwork. You had to show your insurance certificate. You had to show you had permission. You had to show us your approvals. You had to show us your PCR test. It was a lot of things. And they didn't just do that in Seychelles. They did it at every stop along the way. So when they first got onto the plane, in England or Germany, wherever they were, they had to present those documents. When they get to Dubai or their transit, they had to do it again. And then they come to the Seychelles, they present it twice again. So it was an enormously time-consuming. And we knew we could never reopen with that. So with Travizory, we've done it. And I'm proud to say that this morning, my minister sent us a note to say that this year, Seychelles is the fastest-growing economy in Africa at 7.7% growth. And I think this had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, that's so great to hear. And just staying with you, Alan. I mean, I recently was at World Travel Market Africa a couple of weeks ago, and the message I kept saying is, look, we're globally competitive here. The Seychelles is competing with destinations in the Caribbean or in Asia or wherever it may be for customers, and therefore it's as important as possible to have as few barriers to entry for the visitors as possible. And Seychelles was the first African country to implement biometrics at their borders. So the question is, you've got two sets of customers. One is, of course, the visitors themselves and the experience the individuals have. But even above them, which is what I'm interested in, is the airlines. Because, of course, the airlines are your biggest customer. Without them, you don't have the visitors. So I'm sure the airline response to what you've brought in and what you've put in here has been incredible in terms of its increasing the attractiveness for them to start service. Is that the feedback that you're getting?
Absolutely, John. In fact, I'm actually delighted. A couple of the airlines actually use our system in their talks with other governments. Early on, we were thinking of things like a $50 health tax to be imposed on airlines and things like this. And being a long-serving member of Air Seychelles and knowing IATA and what airlines face, the challenges they face, we did not want to put anything that would inconvenience the airlines. And so early on, we decided it's something that we do with the tourists. It's not a cost to the airlines. And we were lucky in that, as Tom mentioned, the industry veterans that we had as part of Travizory, I mean, they were able to connect with airlines. I've seen them do it within 3 to 5 days. In the case of some of the other airlines, it took a few months of work, but they were really professional. It worked really quickly, and the airlines were eager to look for technology solutions to open. Because at that time, as you can imagine, John, everyone wants to fly. Everyone wants to try and make it work. And it was an amazing sort of, the airlines are looking for something, and when you met them halfway, as we did with the technology, they were just leaping over themselves to have it work. And thus far, it's been really easy. So what happens is, John, a traveler only needs to present a simple QR code at the check-in desk. This was our idea. And so that it's all the work of screening has been done ahead of time by the country, by everybody else. In the thematic, we don't want any complex sort of, okay, if the guy's from Bangladesh, or if he's from this country, and if it was 3 days ago, or if he came by this, or things like that, we didn't want all of that. And so we take care of all of this ourselves and give a simple authorization to travel to all travelers, which for the airlines was as simple as it could be, and no cost for them. And that's it. And that's the feedback we get from several airlines, world-class airlines who've flown here and fly to other destinations. And we get the same also, I have to say, from aviation professionals who've had to use it when they come to Seychelles. They'll say, wow, you guys had a good system. So I'm pretty happy with that, I have to say.
Yeah, I can't wait to experience it myself. And of course, the other thing that Seychelles has, which it had pre-pandemic, is you're basically visa free for everybody to arrive in the island as well. So that reduces the complexity as well. But so I think ultimately it's great to hear that the airlines responded, and of course they did. I mean, anything that inconveniences their passengers is an issue for them to deal with as well. So Tom, I want to come back to you to talk a bit more about the system, because I think there'll be a lot of people's ears who have pricked up listening to Alan's experience and what you said right at the beginning about making this cloud-based, making it less capital intensive up front, because we know that airports in the last couple of years and civil aviation authorities, especially in Africa, about 80% of their revenue is aeronautical driven, and of course that activity hasn't happened, so the revenues are just not there in the kitty. But they'll be asking three questions, I think, and on their behalf I'd like to sort of pose these three questions to you. The first one is, how much does it cost? The second is, how quickly can it be implemented? And the third one is integration with the current systems. And actually there is a fourth one which you touched on, which is, what about the data and the ownership of the data? So four big questions, but if you could take those for us, that would be great.
Time, money, data. Okay. Money first. That's the most important, right? Actually, time is more important. As Alan pointed out, the solution is self-financing. So there was zero upfront investment by the government of the Seychelles. The other governments in Africa that we're talking to now, same deal. There is zero upfront investment required from the government. The solution is financed by a charge for the travel authorization. It's currently free for Seychelles. It's not even really a travel authorization for them. Once COVID's past us, it'll be a declaration allowing them to move swiftly through the immigration line by providing all their data electronically in advance. And 10 euros for foreign visitors, which is comparable to the travel authorization charges in the US, what's going to be happening in Europe next year when they finally get their IT straight. They've been struggling with that, Canada, Australia, and so on. And the key point here is that travel authorizations were initially developed, actually in the US and in Australia, in order to maintain a visa-free status. Because after 9/11, after COVID, after you started having these threats at your border, one way to deal with that is impose visas on everyone so you can check them out in advance, apply in advance, maybe go to an embassy in person, although no one does that anymore, and make sure that everything is safe and kosher. Nobody wants to do that for all the reasons you mentioned. It makes travel more onerous, makes it less fun, it complicates things. So travel authorization is a way for governments to maintain that visa-free status, to protect the visa-free status, while still ensuring that the borders are secure. Time. We deployed in Seychelles before I got here, but we deployed in 4 to 6 weeks. How can we do it so fast? Because the solution is cloud-based. It's configured to meet all the requirements of the Seychelles or any other government. As I said earlier, I've deployed these solutions in over 20 countries. I was in Riyadh for over a year, and when I left, we had still not gone live because we had to import all the hardware. We had to bring the coders in to write the code locally. It just took forever. And that's why I mentioned the quantum leap in technology. when you go to the cloud, and everything's going to the cloud today, as we know, it changes everything. It makes the solution much cheaper, much more agile, and much quicker to deploy. Data. It's not our data. We're the data processor. The data belongs to the government of the Seychelles. Travelers coming to the Seychelles provide that data to the government of Seychelles in order to be able to present themselves to an immigration officer and hopefully be admitted. Generally, they are. We have complete integration with the immigration office here and the primary line, as well as with the Ministry of IT, DICT they call it here. We feed, the data flows both ways. We send them the data every day. Here's who's come in, you store it, it's your data. We get data back from them. That enables us to query their watch lists, people who have overstayed their visas, people with an arrest warrant, anything that is of interest to the Seychelles government, to immigration, which might raise a red flag or may make a traveler inadmissible. Perhaps they overstayed a previous visa. We're able to query those databases in real time, get a yes/no answer back. We don't necessarily need to see the data. And that allows us to make the right adjudication of a travel authorization. And then when the immigration officer in turn uses our system in the primary line, he has all the data in front of himself, not just all the pieces of paper uploaded by the traveler, but also the results of the Seychelles government databases that I mentioned earlier to make the right decision about admissibility. Data, we are GDPR compliant. We're based in Europe. So we take data privacy and data protection very, very seriously, as does the government of the Seychelles. And we've worked with them very, very closely to make sure that travelers coming to the Seychelles, the majority of whom are from EU countries and therefore subject to GDPR, and they expect their data to be protected up to that level, to make sure that they're comfortable and that they know that their travel is safe and that their data is safe. And that's what we do. Time, money, and data. We try to get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's much more preferable to have it all stored in the cloud than on a piece of paper that I write out on the arrival into my destination and hand over to somebody. I think also
we don't, John, we don't store it in the cloud. It's processed in the cloud, then it's stored here in Seychelles by the Seychelles government.
Right, thank you. Yeah,
it's that data processing in the cloud that makes it fast and agile and cheap. But data storage, medium to long-term storage, that's all right here in the Seychelles.
Right. So you're like you say, you're just the vehicle.
Sorry for that OCD comment that you get from IT people all the time.
No, not at all, because I think that's a really important point to make, because of course, like you say, the data protection element is super important. The other thing that stood out for me is, €10 is a small price to pay, like Alan said, versus a 2-3 hour wait getting off the plane to make that.
That's one drink in a fancy Seychelles hotel.
half a drink, I think, isn't it? Half a drink. And although I'm sure it's great value to visit. And then, of course, comparing that to the cost of a visa, some of the African countries, it's hundreds of dollars to get a visa, and it's a very complicated process. So it's not just the actual cost, it's the actual cost of all the time and all of the process to pre-arrange. And also, like you say, it's almost a white label solution. So a new government can come in and say, okay, you've implemented it here, we can put it in with a few tweaks rather than building it from scratch. So I wanted to come back to you on that, Alan, for a couple of questions. One is, how have the visitors responded to the extra cost and the different process? But secondly, how do those who aren't as tech savvy, so I'm thinking of my 75-year-old mother, obviously I could help her, but she's got to download an app, upload everything before. How do you cater for the visitors that don't know what to do ahead of time? How do they process?
Great questions, John. One of the features that I liked about the cloud-based solution as well is that it's customizable, in the sense that for the front end and also in the back end, we're able to make adjustments in real time. So when the doctors, for example, and the public health were using the system, they would say to us, "Oh, look, could you add this in there, or could you make a change here," and so forth. And what was really important was that the front end really reflects our requirements. So from the tourists themselves, we've had great reviews, and that's because for them it was peace of mind. If you download the app, you can complete an application within 2 minutes. And using the app, it stores your information so that the second time you use it, it's even faster. So you've answered the questions before. And one of the things that I've enjoyed as well with the version of this technology is that they're continually upgrading it. And so we get the benefit of any upgrades they make to the system. So when they improve the back end, perhaps from an experience with another country that they're working with, we also get the benefit of that. And that's just wonderful. It's sort of like your iPhone always getting an upgrade and just free upgrade and things like that. So that's built into that, and that's just been marvelous for me. Again, going back to some of the solutions that we were looking at before, it was a much more complex process. It's not only capital intensive, but not as customizable. That's our system, you use it the way it's meant to be used. Whereas for us, I honestly say it's something that we like. So we've had great feedback from the tourists. That peace of mind, the seamlessness, and I'll tell you, John, just now I went to an Asian country last week, and I was reminded of what it was like in 2020 for us. At each step of the destination, I had to show 5 or 6 different documents before we can go to the next, because the destination required us to prove our insurance, improve our PCR, show that we've done their version of the health pass and so on. And you had to show all these documents. And then on arrival, we were handed 2 more documents to fill in. One was the immigration card, and another was another health quarantine card we had to fill. And we were susceptible to 14-day quarantine if we failed the first test. So you can imagine, it's still not everywhere in the world has done this. And so that's it. Now, for the grandmas, one of the things, John, I have to tell you, we always remember this in aviation, but sometimes your faith is tested. This propensity to travel. When the pandemic happened and the world shut down, we're thinking, oh, maybe now the world of travel will change forever. People will not go on holidays ever again. What did we notice? As soon as it was able, it came back. It's the same thing. So what we found is you can't stop people. So let's take the grandmas. First of all, there are some very sophisticated grandmas and grandpas out there. I think I can tell you now, we've had some 75, 65-year-olds having no problem. They're now Zooming, chatting with their grandchildren, and they have a little bit of tech savvy. But those who do not, our app allows somebody else to fill it on your behalf. And so what we typically see is the sons, daughters, nephews, relatives of travelers who do it for them. And we also have a chatbot and we contact people by WhatsApp when the application is made. And if there's any problem with the application, we help you in real time. That's also something that I remember when we did it. I thought, man, this is a government portal, but we have a chatbot, and we're actually talking to people to help them get here. Which, again, we did it because it's tourism, it's our lifeblood, and we did this, but it's a little bit unusual, but we've kept it. And the average duration is about 20 minutes. That we talk to a person, but it's only a small percentage of those travelers. As of today, I think Tom can correct me. We've processed over 250, maybe 300,000 travelers at this point, and most of them has been very seamless and smooth. And so, we have a lot of people over the age of 65 who are somehow getting here and leaving and coming back. So we've solved that and made it as easy as possible. The last point that I wanted to make, John, was something that you touched upon. Was even though the pandemic is over, one of the things is, you probably remember, John, when you came, we had a blue landing card that you had to fill in. And there was also a white health card. So we've actually retired those blue cards in February 2022. As Tom was saying, over a year of integration with the ICT departments, with all the existing systems took place. So today, there's no paper. It's a completely paperless experience. And for those who complete that, and as we screen you and as we get better, we expect perhaps 90% of people will be able to walk into Seychelles with just their faces. Since we've screened you and taken your selfie and, oh, there you are. Well, yeah, go ahead. We know you. Oh, you want a stamp just for, tourism purposes as a souvenir? No problem. We'll stamp it. But otherwise, go ahead, sir. That's ultimately the vision that we're aiming for. And to me, it's like a technological version of our visa-free, yet at the same time in a very subtle way, keeping our borders safe. As Tom said, travel authorization is meant to sustain our visa-free status. It's not in any way meant to be an e-visa. It's a way for us to sort of extend our border processes further out virtually in order for you to have a seamless experience on your way here and when you arrive, and to make that initial experience as easy as possible. So our goal is a couple of minutes to fill it in, And in the future, maybe we'll remember you so you can do multiple entries on one application, things like that. So, and we're continuing refining it to make it easier and easier. So, yeah, hope that answers your question there. Like it's worked out quite nicely for the grandmas and for the tourists.
It certainly does. I think that to take away the opportunity and the option of paper based, etc., and just say, look, this is the way it's going, and somebody will help you. It will make that adaptation and that adoption of it so much quicker as well. Tom, before we finish, a couple of questions for you. New uses and new ways of actually putting this system in for different things. What have you learned the last couple of years, and what's coming? But also, what's the reaction been? Have you got a lot of African governments and African countries coming to you now saying, we want to look at this solution? You've proved the concept really nicely in Seychelles, and we think this could work in our country. Like, what's the reaction been from the African market?
Yeah, before I answer that question, let me add one point to what Alan just said. For us, customer service is paramount, and we operate 24/7. As I like to tell people, the software is easy. What's hard is the human beings. And so, yeah, you are going to have grandmas and grandfathers out there who may not have cell phones. Generally, they do. So we have agents on duty 24/7. Doesn't matter if grandma's flying from New York City or San Francisco or Beijing or Sydney or Cape Town. There's someone on the other end of the line to walk them through it. We're creating a Facebook page with videos to make it easier for people to do it. We really want this to be as simple and as easy as possible for all travelers. That's in our DNA. I've hired over 50 people here who do nothing but customer service day in and day out. Alan mentioned the chatbot. We've also developed a new capability, click to call. So if an application comes in or a traveler has an issue, the agent can just click on that visitor, and a call is placed, an IP call, so it's nice and cheap, and walk them through it. And that's very important to us to make sure that this is as easy as possible, as simple as possible for all travelers. Now, looking into the crystal ball, what's coming down the pike, so to speak, what are the new uses, and what are we learning from other governments? Well, first and foremost, we've gone live this year with biometric corridor, which we've talked about already. But this is something I was talking about 15 years ago, the convergence of biographic data solutions like API, PNR, and traveler authorizations with biometric solutions. And that is something that no one else in Africa is using today. And that is going to be, that's hot. That gives you all the benefit, all the security benefits that we've been talking about, as well as all the facilitation benefits that are so important to travelers and to airlines. So that's something very big, and it happened here first. By the way, the biometric corridor, and I can't wait for you to come and walk through it, it was made in the Seychelles. We brought the CAD CAM designs here. We brought in the Hikvision cameras and the servers and everything else, but the actual device was built and assembled here. I mean, it looks like it's made out of titanium or something, but it's actually local wood, painted, and it's beautiful. And we had local artists helping us to design it to make sure that it didn't just work well, but that it looked cool, that it looks nice, and it does. Other things coming down the pike, a big thing here has been ancillary services. You create this website that allows travelers to apply for a travel authorization, pay for a travel authorization, a nominal fee, of course. But the government and a number of local companies are like, well, let's use that platform to make the visitor experience even better. Allow them to order a COVID test if it's required for a return home to America or France or wherever they're going. That's kind of going away now, but that's been very big for the last 12 months. SIM cards. I come here, I'm going to be on workcation, or I need to stay in touch with the office. I don't want to use my Google Fi card because it'll be terribly expensive. I can get a cheap SIM card. Why not order in advance? And we're working with the telecoms companies to look at that. Tour bookers, looking at tours. I'm coming, I might like to spend an afternoon hiking in the mountains or scuba diving or taking a boat trip to one of the cool islands right offshore. We provide the capability for local small and medium-sized companies to get their wares out, to get their activities out in front of travelers, to really make the most wonderful holiday experience you could possibly imagine right here in the Seychelles. Those are the things that we're working on here, talking about this with other governments. Um, some governments like South, we're talking with many governments in South Africa. I mean, in Africa, including South Africa and North Africa. Some of them already have these solutions, but it's the old technology. And they're just blown away when they see the things that we can do with this quantum leap technology, cloud-based, mobile apps, and so on. And so that'll be a big thing as well. It's kind of like the difference between Windows 3.1 and, Mac, or what are we now on? Catalina, Snow Leopard, I forget what it is. I'll have to look on my computer. But it's just a huge difference, not just in the user interface and the user experience, but just in how fast it is, how well it works, and how cheap it is. Those are the big things coming up ahead.
No, brilliant, brilliant. I think, ultimately it appeals to the airline, it appeals to the visitor, and it obviously would then appeal to the government from as we said, from a capex and an implementation perspective as well. So it seems like a bit of a no-brainer. Alan, did you want to add something?
Yeah, we did a presentation. We had our 50th year Jubilee celebration at the airport, celebrating 50 years of operation since 1972, when Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II opened up our airport. And afterwards, we did a set of presentations for the president himself and the vice president and the assembled ministers. And even I was blown away by the airport team on the benefits that the technology has done. So this year, the Civil Aviation Authority was able to reach, thanks to our retirement of the landing cards and the continual improvement in the processes, the ICAO standard of 45 minutes for you to come in and come out. We're actually at 43 minutes and it's dropping. We think by the end of the year we might get this down to 20 minutes. And that's actually the hard goal we've been given. 20 minutes for somebody to get off the plane, and so like a walking pace journey through Seychelles if you have no luggage and don't want to buy duty free. Imagine that. A walking pace journey. I mean, it's a nice vision, and we can actually achieve that, right? And then also from the immigration officers themselves, because we've extended the vetting and the screening further out, and as they've adjusted to that reality. So before, they only saw you when you got there. So they're sort of screening you there, and occasionally they'd have to, as Tom was saying, somebody was inadmissible. But that's expensive for the airlines. It's expensive for them. And you don't know whether, you catch everybody because you're under stress. You've got a lot of things to do because the officers were, in addition to vetting people, were also typing in information and taking in up to 2 hours to type in all the data. Now this is all automatic. It's getting into the system, and things are being queried in real time. So for them, they've managed to do amazing security things, catching people and others and whatever. So above all other things, it's in addition to just how it's seamless for the traveler, it's also improved the government's operations. The airport is faster. The immigration officers have much more powers than they had before. So much so that we'd have a right on our hands if we tried to remove it. I'll tell you that right now because they're so wedded to that. And then finally, the data that we collect. So a few weeks ago, earlier this year, we had the UNWTO come and looked at our data collection system, and they were, I have to say, they said ours is one of the best in the world because we do everything all in one place. In other countries, it's usually you have several systems that have to link to each other. So this is something that's evolving, where now we're having different government agencies sort of querying the data. As Tom mentioned, they don't hold the data, they process it for us. And one of those is we can de-anonymize the data and make it a database that can be queried where there's nothing personal on anybody, like, male 45 from Germany, and so forth, party of 4. And the data is just incredibly rich, so much so that they're using us to do surveys, because we can do that now. We can contact people. So it's almost, I think it was Michael Faraday who was asked by Queen Victoria, when he was showing her the power of electricity, he was waving a magnet over a wire and showing, hey, look, I can create a current. And Her Majesty said to him, but of what use is this? And he responded, Your Majesty, of what use is a newborn baby? And so here he was, and what do we see today with electricity in our whole modern world? So as Tom was saying, it's unbelievable that in the midst of a pandemic, we were able to implement this technology. Seychelles being small and tiny, we were being very nimble that we could do it. It's a little harder at bigger countries, I think. But right now, I feel like we're sitting astride something really awesome. We've done things that it's really hard, and I'm just so happy. It's like it almost happened by accident. So from this lemons that we got from the pandemic, we've made this incredible lemonade, and we're taking advantage of it, and it just keeps getting better. So I'm very pleased for us that we've done it, and I can't wait for the future to unfurl for us in Seychelles and see what else we can do with it.
Fantastic, fantastic. What a great testimonial. So, Tom, I think we've whetted everybody's appetite. So for those who are listening, before we let you go, how can they get in touch? How can they find out more? How can they get hold of your team?
We have teams deployed all over Africa and all over the world. As I said, in South Africa, in North Africa, and Tunisia. The easiest way is to go to our website, travisry.com. They can also just contact me directly, tom.marten, M-A-R-T-E-N, at travisry.com. And depending on where the question is coming from, what country they're in, I'll make sure it gets to the right person and that they get a very personalized response, maybe even a knock on their door.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'll put those links in the show notes as well. So anybody listening, you can just open up the show there, and you click straight there, and you can send an email direct to Tom or check out the website. So thank you both for joining me today. It's amazing to see these game-changing technologies coming through, and in such a during such a difficult time. But well done to both of you for having that foresight, and I'm sure it's for the whole benefit of Africa. So thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you, John. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, John.
Wonderful. So thank you out there. If you did enjoy this episode, please don't hesitate to hit that share button. Share it with somebody in your network you think would benefit from having a listen. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast as well. And also, don't forget to get yourself registered for Africa's only air service development event, which is coming up in Cape Town, 29th of June to the 1st of July, hosted by the Cape Town Air Access team. We will see you all there, and we'll see you for the next episode of the podcast very soon. Thank you all for joining us. Bye-bye.